Шановні колеги,
Dear colleagues, dear participants, let us start our final press conference in a format of panel discussion, which is called European Integration 2017. The choice is made. With big pleasure, I would like to introduce the panelists of our first panel, which is called the Association Agreement, a Guide for Comprehensive Modernization in Ukraine. We have Madam Klympush-Tsintsadze, Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration of Ukraine. We have Ms. Maria Ionova, MP of Ukraine, Acting Chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on European Integration. We have Mr. Thomas Frellesen, Deputy Head of the EU Delegation to Ukraine, and Mr. Vsevolod Chentsov, Director of the European Union Unit of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I would like to remind you that we will give the floor to the audience. Also, we have via Skype Crisis Media Center from Kherson, Mariupol, Chernivtsi. And I would like to start with a statement that probably the year 2017 promises to be even more complicated in terms of sticking with our commitments in line with the association agreement, and this might require a new paradigm in cooperation with the Parliament, civil society, our international partners, etc. With this, I would like to give the floor to Madam Prime Minister. What positive aspects in association agreement implementation you see? What negative aspects you might mention? Thank you, Maria. Thank you, dear colleagues. I think that's a good opportunity to discuss the first outcomes and the prospects of our future cooperation. I'm very grateful to the executive deputy head of the EU delegation to Ukraine, to Mr. Frellesen. I'm very grateful to Maria Ionova, who has been cooperating very closely with us and serves as a link with the European Parliament members. And I am very grateful to Ms. Vsevolod Chentsov. And nevertheless, always when it comes to such meetings as today, it happens that somebody is on business trip. That's why probably we won't get all the answers today, but nevertheless, this is a chance to review what the situation with the progress. I would like to encourage everybody to look objectively on our achievements from the previous year, from 2016, and to assess those achievements from the point of view that during the previous more than 20 years of independence, during the last year, we managed to move much far forward in terms of European integration. During the last year, we launched serious processes in reform of many aspects of our social life, including implementation of the association agreement. And when you try to reform everything and everywhere, on the one hand, this appears to be rather complicated and cumbersome task on the one hand. On the other hand, you face a lot of resistance from those who are not interested in reforms. and at the same time you struggle to cover very different sectors of life, and this adds the number, multiply the number of issues. I would like to mention the latest events which happened before the end of the last year. This is in more deep reform of the judiciary, more deep reform of the civil service, and I believe that this will have further profound impact on business climate, on business development in this country, and it will contribute to improvement of the people's well-being and quality of life in this country. I think that as of the moment we are crossing the Rubicon River. I think that European integration more and more becomes not the issue of foreign policy. We have big challenges with the political dialogue with some European capitals. We have some issues and difficulties with visa-free regime, but despite all those external obstacles, we more and more shift to the domestic dialogue about necessary reforms and changes, and how those progressive changes may change the quality of life in this country. As for the visa-free regime, we had reached the point when all technical requirements are implemented, and currently the dialogue had shifted to the more political sphere, and we still hope for the positive solution which Ukraine deserves, and we get assurances on this issue from many international partners. The democratic transformation which is going on in the country became possible due to several factors. I think the presence of the strong will in the government, the group of members of parliament who are very committed to the reforms. Also, we observe strong advocacy activities of the civil society and from experts backing up civil society. And also, we are very grateful to the support from the European Union and to those countries with whom we cooperate bilaterally in the area of reforms. Recently, we had signed a set of agreements with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, with the European Union, with the European Commission. Among them, the Memorandum on Energy Cooperation, which became the result of our hard work in the previous years, not just from 2016, but from the previous years. You should understand that all such agreements, they take much effort, they require time for preparation, and finally, in 2016, we managed to sign those agreements, which provide for very good opportunities for Ukraine. And about opportunities, I may develop further if you wish. but 5 minutes which were allowed, for me, it's not enough to describe everything in European integration. Also, I would like to mention several facts which and trends which we clearly observe from the moment we joined the free trade agreement. During the first 10 months of 2016, the turnover with European Union had grown more than 6%. Moreover, taking into account the armed conflict and aggression of Russian Federation, we lost Russian markets, and especially in result of hostile actions of Russia against transit of Ukrainian goods through territory of Russia, we had lost Asian markets, which were traditional for us. But as of now, the amounts of Ukraine's trade with the European Union amount to 41% of our trade turnover, external trade turnover. And I think that development of our mutual trade with this very partner allows us not just be present in the European market, but also opens for us access to third country markets. Thus, we get access not to just 500 million people or consumers in Europe, but to bigger amount of potential consumers. I hope that in the incoming year, we will strengthen our trade with this trade partner, and I hope that the turnover may grow on the account of additional autonomous preferences which were offered by the European Commission and are subject to approval from the European Parliament. Also, we hope that we will manage to decrease non-tariff barriers related to sanitary and phytosanitary measures. Today we have Mr. Volodymyr Lapa in this room who may explain more about our objectives in this area. We also count for signing the agreement about mutual recognition of industrial standards for industrial goods, which could be signed within first 6 months. And I think that as soon as we harmonize our public procurement legislation with the European one, this would open for us access to the services market in the European Union. Also, we devote much attention to the SMEs development. I expect that rather soon the government would ratify our COSMA agreement, which would allow us to train our small businessmen for being able to go to the European market, to be as professional as the bigger businesses are. Of course, we should think about closer political strengthening of political side of our association agreement, work more in the human rights area. I think that we reached that our achievements in anti-corruption reform are considerable, and because we managed to establish anti-corruption, national anti-corruption bodies, which started to work last year, which was not so easy, by the way. We had to train people, to select them, and by the end of the year, they started to work, and I believe that eventually electronic declaration system would improve the situation with anti-corruption work. The first 100,000 civil servants became subject of this system coverage. They are covered now by this system, and this is unprecedented scale, unprecedented number of people. I hope that National Anti-Corruption Bureau would finally decide about the criteria alongside with which they will double check those automatic declarations and file cases about offenses. Then another, I think, good achievement was about judiciary reform. I should thank the parliament, which supported constitutional changes, which allowed to launch new selection and change of the judges' corps. Now the judges are in the midst of the selection process, and I think that the system of judges selection and election was done correctly. It was supported by our European partners, and we clearly observed that some judges expressed no wish to become judges again in line with the new system because probably they have doubts whether their corruption deeds won't be discovered, which again assures us that probably we are on the right path, which positively implements our intentions from the revolution of dignity that we should live in more fair society, that we should expect more for business development, for investment climate, etc. Prime Minister's Office Association for You developed some infographics which explains and displays some achievements in the customs area, in energy area, in domestic affairs. I won't discuss in much detail what was done in energy policy in the area in the country, because this is a separate topic, but I think during the last year we set a good basis for further reforming, and the memorandum on energy cooperation, which was signed at the Ukraine EU summit at the during last year, is a good base for further cooperation. In the sector of transportation, there were some achievements. I think that the decision about extension of the European transport network upon neighboring countries allows Ukraine to be part of the European network of transportations, but this again imposes new requirements for Ukraine, and it should become one of the governmental priorities for the years to come. If you ask about joint air space, we work on the agreement. It is not about whether Ukraine complies with some requirements. It is more about the dispute between the UK and Spain. And depending on the solution to that issue, Ukraine might become a signatory country of that agreement. Ukraine also done something in deregulation, in business registration, in opening information on the companies, but this unfortunately does not mean that we have done enough in this area. Also, we lag behind in the protection of consumer rights and food quality assurance, etc. The technical regulations are also the issue. There are some positive movements here, but they are not complete. Also, we have challenges, and those challenges are rather serious. We have to provide sufficient institutional capacity at all levels, at the level of ministry directorates, at the level of parliamentary committees, at the level of governmental agencies, etc. In order to be able to back up, to staff properly this European integration process. Also, we would like to see more initiative from line ministries, from people who are responsible for European integration in line ministries as to specific steps in European integration in their specific areas. Last year, we had a negative case when we almost had passed environmental bill in the parliament, and we expected to have new piece of environmental legislation in the parliament, but it failed at the latest stage. This emphasizes that coordination of work between the line ministries and the parliamentary committees should be closer. We should create this coordination mechanism. Unfortunately, we lack this practice. We lack this tradition of close coordination between bodies preparing legislation. And there is even some resistance, traditional resistance to such coordination. Traditionally, we believe that if I have some information which I think is useful, I should not share this information with somebody else. I think we should more communicate with this, with each other, between the cabinet, between the parliament, in order to speed up decisions which are necessary for the country, which act for the national in favor of national interests, in order to strengthen competitiveness of the country and in order to make it stronger in the international arena. I think we will continue to work in this direction. And I would like to add about a couple of things on which we have been working for some period of time already. We are working on comprehensive monitoring of the association agreement implementation. We work on the monitoring system jointly with our European partners, with the Vice Prime Minister Office, with the Governmental Office on Euro-Atlantic Integration. We try to establish a single monitoring system, single system of reporting on the European integration in order to be sure what we are doing correctly, where we are lagging behind, and why. Also, I would like to encourage to use today's opportunity and encourage all the experts to apply for the jobs in the office, governmental office on European integration. We need experts who are familiar with European legislation, and those who are able to work with Ukraine, who understands Ukrainian legislation, in order to be able to compare both core of laws and to recommend positive changes to our parliament. I encourage you to apply for jobs. And one more challenge which we see, this is translation of European legislation into Ukrainian language. It remains the challenge. For some time in the past, it was the responsibility of the Ministry of Justice. At some moment in the past, it stopped. And currently, we try to resolve this issue in cooperation with experts who are involved to the Association for You project, and they try to assist us in this issue to back up civil servants working on the translations. And now, summing up, we expect also support from the MPs, from our European partners, and from civil society. We clearly understand that we won't be able to reach progress in this process without broad support from civil society. The time of slogans had expired. Today, we are in the midst of the period of action, of routine everyday work. Maybe it is not even attractive work, but we have to carry out this work in order to reach the standards of living which people enjoy in the European countries, and which we as Ukrainians also deserve for. Thank you, Ivanna. I agree with you that it's not easy to cover all the European integration issues within 5 minutes. But nevertheless, I think this is the first such event in this year, but I hope it would become regular. And we will enjoy this opportunity more often. With this, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Maria Ionova. As far as I know, Ukrainian Parliament is a good partner of the government in European integration aspect. During last year, we observed that sometimes the bills were passed very quickly, sometimes they were delayed. So my question to you, whether we may count on the favorable attitude of the Parliament towards European integration. Also, I would like to ask you to provide more detailed information about the latest Parliamentary Assembly meeting. Thank you. I promise to give up 2 minutes from my time to Ivanna. I will try to be very concise. As for the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, it used to be rather tough, and Ukraine is under constant monitoring. And yesterday, the PASE passed resolution on Ukraine, and at the very final stage of discussion on the resolution, we experienced several very tough moments. We had 4 side events besides parliamentary sittings, and we very actively worked in the parliamentary groups and committees. The major negative changes which were offered but were not approved by the Parliamentary Assembly forced us to feel bad for some period of time, but they were not passed. During each such case which we experience now and then in the European Parliament, we then get feedback from our European partners, and we were considerably disillusioned with the statements made by Mr. Gramon's and Mr. Jagland's statements, where they did not mention situation in Ukraine, while a year ago the address from the President of the European Parliament, it sounded differently. But we understand that the situation changes, and nevertheless, we will continue to stand for our principles. We will stick with the principles of the Council of Europe, and we will encourage our partners from the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe not to forget about those principles. Also, we would like to bring to the focus of the leadership of the European Parliament the issue that Russia should comply with the resolutions and to implement at least some provisions from those resolutions, but not to discuss how to bring them back. Now closer to the association agreement.
So this is a political and economic approximation between Ukraine and the European Union. For Ukrainian society, this is the issue of liberty, equality, quality of life, human rights, and supremacy of law. And of course, we aspire to this, and we want that this agreement was fully implemented this year, and unfortunately, a lot depends on the elections in the European Union and also liberalization of visa regime. And this is our home task, I mean this association agreement. And in the context of this agreement we implemented and did our home task, and now we wait for the actions of the European Union without delay and new circumstances. And speaking about Parliament, Ivanna told us about it. The main question is the changes in the agenda of the work of the Parliament and its bodies. And in 2016, there was a special mission of the European Parliament, and we are grateful to Mr. Cox. And some of these recommendations are not implemented, and we work in the working group headed by Speaker, and we hope that this work will succeed, because on the 26th of January we have 8,540 draft laws that still await voting. So, as a Committee on European Integration, for us, it is important to reinforce the role of our committee and parliamentary control on the harmonization of legislation of Ukraine with European legislation and the norms in the draft laws that are reviewed by the Parliament and the legislative initiatives that are submitted by deputies. So the mechanisms to prevent adopting some law that contradicts EU legislation. And Ivanna also said about institutional mechanisms. We speak about it a lot, and the Parliament is in the overall process, and we are interested in joint work to elaborate these institutional mechanisms and to create the system that will be efficient. We need a structure, a body that would be responsible for these processes, to estimate regulatory influence, also center of translation and terminology, because we face problems with terminology. And also there should be delegations responsible for negotiations with the European Union in all areas. And also I fully agree that the provision of coordination and cooperation, we believe that we need the support of society in this, because we see that we need qualified experts, and all this mechanism should be envisaged by law, and there should be proper training and fair financing to train these people. And the mechanism that we plan to envisage, it will create an efficient system in the areas, and we will achieve results in this. And this year in March we plan to have committee hearings, and we have efficient cooperation with the officials in European integration, and we made some conclusions. We see our main problems where we can cooperate, and our work in the Parliament with the heads of factions, with the head of the Parliament, and the deputies. They should not be they should play their role in this, and we know this problem, and Ivanna understands this problem. There are some changes to the agenda, and by joint effort and by changing the mechanisms, we will be able to overcome this problem. And this year will be really difficult, and for us, the association agreement is a positive thing, but also it involves a lot of hard work, really hard work. And I believe that there is not always a compromise. There should be responsibility of each deputy. We do not have two vectors. We have one vector, and we should be responsible, and to be responsible in relation to any initiative, not only in the context of national legislation, but also in the context of European law. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. I know that you have to leave soon. Thank you very much for saying that this is a joint common responsibility of everyone, and we should fight for our interests. And what are your three main priorities in your area of work? What are the priorities this year? What are you planning for this year? So it is really difficult to speak about priorities. I can say that if we want that the work was efficient in all the areas, and we were able to fight the and face the challenges, we should have changes in judiciary, reforms in this area, and other areas will be able to work more efficiently. So law enforcement bodies and anti-corruption authorities, they should work efficiently, and the implementation of a single institutional mechanism is also of importance. And the third task is the changes in agenda of the parliament. So these are the main priorities, the main tasks. So I'm speaking about joint responsibility and also about individual responsibility of each of the deputy, because collective responsibility is dangerous. Thank you very much. So we will join you in these efforts. And now I give the floor to Thomas Frellesen, who is the deputy head of the EU delegation to Ukraine.
Important help EU delegation is providing us, and what I have to admit, we as a civil society, as the government, as the parliament, have always been enjoying this fruitful and very successful cooperation with the EU delegation and with us. So mainly because we have common goals. I mean, stable, democratic, peaceful, prosperous Ukraine, and Ukraine as the country that very effectively implement the association agreement as the roadmap for these reforms. So would we enjoy this very kind of fruitful cooperation in 2017?
Yes. That's all I can say.
But you have 4 and even more minutes left.
You know what? I mean, I prepared quite a few points, but I'll try to boil all my points down to 5 minutes. And I think many things have been said already, and I think it's fair to say that we see eye to eye with many of the things that have been said by the Deputy Prime Minister and also by Masha. So I may come back to a few of these. But let me say, first of all, that 2017, of course, in many ways, is going to be a very important year, as we all know. But also for EU-Ukraine relations, it's going to be quite an important year. We will see the association agreement finally ratified by the EU, pending, of course, the final decisions to be taken in the Netherlands. And we will also see the visa liberalization agreement coming into force. I mean, that's for sure. We just need to go through the last procedural steps. Okay, I'll slow down. I just have these 5 minutes in mind. So in that sense, we will see a lot of important things in our relationship coming into force. And one thing a point I wanted to make is that, of course, these two things, ratification and the visa issue, especially the visa issue, are very important, and they have been very much in the attention of the media and the broader public in Ukraine. Fully understandable. What frustrates us a bit sometimes is that our relationship is much broader than that. We are working very closely, providing support for reforms in Ukraine, which over the long term are going to benefit the country and the people of Ukraine. And sometimes the focus is maybe lost a bit by the focus on the visa issue. So we also, I can assure you, look forward to this coming fully into force so that we can also move on from there and focus on some of the other issues. The association agreement is a blueprint for reform. It doesn't mean that everything that the EU does is perfect. But it's a model that has worked for a lot of especially the new EU member states, and it's a model that also is going to be very useful as Ukraine moves forwards with its reforms. It's the most comprehensive agreement that the EU has ever engaged in with any third country because of the ambition that Ukraine had when the agreement was negotiated. And it's of course backed by, as you know, very significant financial assistance. And I don't want to go through all the figures, but since 2014, the EU has committed already more than 4.3 billion euros in new grants and loans, of which over half have been dispersed. And EU macro-financial assistance to Ukraine is the biggest the EU has ever given to a non-EU member state, at 3.4 billion euros, of which 2.2 have already been dispersed. And there's also this rather unprecedented 8 billion euro engagement for fresh concessional loans for public infrastructure and private sector investments by the European Investment Bank and the EBRD. And almost half of this has been allocated. I think it's quite an important point to make. And this is done, of course, to support Ukraine, but it's also done in the interest of the EU, because Ukraine is a very important big neighbor of the EU, and it's in our own interest to see Ukraine reforming and prospering and becoming a very stable partner for the EU. So it's not just something we are doing for Ukraine for the sake of doing it. And as was mentioned also, the association agreement and the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement opens up new business opportunities for Ukrainian business in the EU. But an important point to keep in mind is also that as Ukraine reforms and takes on board some of the EU regulation and approximation, many of which are international standards, it will also be easier for Ukrainian business to engage broader internationally. So it's not only a question of improving trade with the EU, but it's going to help Ukraine wider internationally. In terms of the implementation of the association agreement, 2017 is also going to be a very important year, because this is something we are now going to focus on very much close cooperation between the Deputy Prime Minister's office and certainly the EU delegation. And excuse me. We work on this very closely. And in this context, it's very important for us to stick to focus on the strategic planning and to stick on some of the timelines of the association agreement and also in the government action plans that have been elaborated for implementation, and to update and review these action plans as we move along and find obstacles and possible delays, that we review these and take this into account. And while approximation and regulation is an important aspect of it, we already need to think a bit ahead in terms of implementation and enforcement, which is also going to be quite a challenge as we move forward. Again, I would like to emphasize the important role played by the Deputy Prime Minister and the Government Office for European Integration in taking on board this. And of course, very important to have close cooperation, as was mentioned, with the various line ministries, the Deputy Ministers for European Integration, and also the European integration units in the ministries, which have a very important role to play here. And indeed, the Parliament, the Rada, also very important role to play. And we would also like to see maybe an increased, intensified use of practices such as doing white and green papers, preliminary discussions on draft legislation, so the Parliament is fully involved, and also discussions, intensified discussions between the line ministries and the various committees in Parliament. And then, of course, there's the general issue of stepping up communication to citizens, Ukrainian citizens, so they have a better understanding of what the association agreement is about and what it means for Ukrainian society, and also to ensure very close involvement of civil society and professional organizations. Just briefly, I wanted to highlight what we're doing in very concrete terms to support this process of implementation of the agreement. We provide a lot of, as part of our assistance, a lot of targeted assistance. We have 18 projects which are specifically intended to support institutional capacity building related to implementation of the agreement. And these projects we are implementing in very close dialogue with the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister and other colleagues concerned. And these projects in themselves amount to about 50 million euros, and they cover a lot of different areas, including public procurement, transport, energy, SPS, agriculture, competition, financial services, just to mention a few. And then just to stay below my 5 minutes, let me say that just a brief word on reforms. I think many of you will have seen, it's a public document. The EU issued a report on association implementation in December last year. You can find it on the internet, which I think gave a very balanced and rather positive assessment of reforms in Ukraine. It said in 2015 and 2016, Ukraine has undertaken intense and unprecedented reforms across a number of sectors of the economy and society, while its democratic institutions have been further revitalized. And this is kind of the overall assessment. And I think it has been said before, but I think I would like to repeat it today, that our assessment is that if you look at reforms, more things have happened over the past 2-3 years than in the previous 20. A lot has been done, and if you consider that this has been done in the face of Russian aggression and the illegal annexation of Crimea, I think it's quite impressive, and I think few countries would have been able to do so in the way that Ukraine has done. There's a long list of positive reforms. I don't want to go through this. You can consult the report. Overall, our assessment is quite positive. And it's, of course, important now that 2017 has to be the year when we implement the association agreement and where the reform process in Ukraine, hand in hand with implementation, moves forward. And I'll be honest with you and say that we were disappointed last week that the Parliament didn't take forward the very important environmental legislation that was mentioned earlier also, and also to see that legislation on decentralization also was not taken on board. So we hope these issues will come back to the Parliament very soon. And we also hope that steps will be taken to deal with the issue of the wood export ban. You know, this has been a big issue in our bilateral relations. Forests, yes, need to be protected. They're also being done so in the EU, but it has to be done in a way that does not distort trade and is in compliance with international rules and obligations. In the important area of anti-corruption, Ukraine has made a lot of efforts in setting up these new institutions. Very, very important. A lot of progress has been made. And we are also launching new projects to make sure these institutions get the kind of international support, whatever is needed in terms of building the capacity, because we want to make sure they are able to play their full active and independent role in fighting corruption in Ukraine, which we think is essential in order to be able to move ahead with any other reforms. We also hope this year to see the setup of an anti-corruption court, something we're supporting very strongly. Progress with privatization, where a lot of additional progress is needed, and more focused on energy efficiency, which is an area where the EU would like to provide much more support when Ukraine is ready to do so. Yeah, let me just conclude by saying, you know, as Commission President Juncker has said, you know, the more you reform, the more we support. I mean, that's kind of our line. And we think there's good momentum in Ukraine. It has to be kept up now, and we will certainly provide support. And I can assure you the EU delegation, we will be in the front line here and working very closely with the ministries and everybody who's working on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frellesen, for your valuable insights. And thank you for stressing on this option of more for more. So I do hope that we will get more by doing more. And what about your own 3 top priorities for 2017? What would it be?
It's difficult. There's so many priorities, you know, but in this context and the discussion we're having here today, I think getting implementation of the association agreement really on track, you know, so we feel confident that things are going ahead is really a top priority. And then secondly, the overall reform process in Ukraine, you know, it's a priority for us to make sure that we provide the kind of support that is needed to taking reforms forward. And then thirdly, I would say overall the security situation in Ukraine, you know, we will have to do what we can because reforms can really advance best in a situation where you have more stability than has been the case over the past years.
Thank you very much. Very important focus. So I hope you'll join the discussion a bit later. Пане Всеволод, вже було дуже багато.
So a lot has been said about visa-free regime, and we heard that our European partners are open and ready to provide visa-free regime in the nearest future. That's why I would like to hear your opinion about the progress in this area, and also focus what should Ukraine do in order to hold the focus of our European partners, because we see that some partners start to lose interest in Ukraine. So what can we do to reverse this trend? I would like to start with 3 priorities, and in the framework of my speech concerning those matters you've mentioned, I would like to say that European integration becomes more and more our internal issue, and we can feel it in the algorithms that are in the work of the Secretariat of the Cabinet of Ministers and the work of the ministries. And we, as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we get new opportunities, and we focus more on international aspects of this work. And as the first priority, I would mention the preservation of unity inside the EU and the whole bloc. I mean, the whole block of issues concerning Ukraine. This is sanctions against Russian Federation, preservation of these sanctions, and also ratification and taking a final decision on visa-free regime and trade preferences. So also we face these problems last year, and the situation won't change much in 2017. I mean, the political situation in some countries of the European Union become a factor in the bilateral relationship with the European Union, and we should take this into account in our work. And there will be elections in the European states, and we have to work more with our European partners in order to support dynamics of our bilateral cooperation with the EU at the same level, the political dialogue, and implementation of the association agreement. The second block of issues and the second priority is the reinforced coordination in our cooperation. We should be united inside, and we should have good cooperation with our European partners and other partners. We should reinforce this coordination. We should get more support from the group of countries that support of Ukraine, and Ukraine is supported, and a lot of money is allocated for this, but we should prioritize our tasks, and we should jointly establish in what way, and we should establish the most efficient way how to use these resources in Ukraine. And maybe this is a priority. Third priority, as I see it, elaboration of joint understanding about the model of our cooperation. What I mean, political and economic association, so these are the categories that are used for a long time, but we should somehow transform them into short-term and mid-term targets, goals, in order to clearly understand the essence of this integration. I will give an example. Visa-free regime is the example when midterm goal is established clearly, and it allows to carry out reforms, to organize in a proper way the work of the departments, and to get real, clear results. This is the creation of separate departments and the migration service that didn't exist before, and the creation of the institute, the protection of personal data, anti-corruption body's creation. So this is the example when the goal allows us to reach real results. And in other sectors concerning energy sphere, transport, we together with our European partners, we should identify those midterm goals, and they should be clear for the public, and and of course, the officials in the ministries should understand these tasks and goals clearly. So, and there should be clear mechanism how to reach these goals. There should be step-by-step change in the instrument of support. We were speaking about visa-free regime. We have one mechanism, technical support in the framework of TAIEX and at bilateral level. Now, if we are speaking about the issues of fighting corruption, we have new generation of programs. And if we go back to the question that Thomas mentioned, so fighting corruption, security sector reform, and there is a separate mission, UAMM, and according to our agenda, we believe that European Union and other partners will establish proper and will calibrate their help and will reinforce this support. Thank you, Vsevolod. Of course, in 2017, that we hope that we will have joint front inside the country, and that our foreign partners will support us. So before Q&A session, I would like to give the floor to Ivanna Orestevna in order that she would be able to voice her 3 priorities for 2017. I have more than 3, actually. You can mention more. Even in the issues of European integration, I have more priorities. First, I would like to mention what Thomas said about the necessity to establish clear agenda to implement the association agreement. And for this, for what I said before about monitoring instruments, about translation, and institutional capabilities, these are those instruments that should provide positive aspects, and we depend on the ministries and their capabilities and their initiatives, and of course the parliament. And second thing that is really important is the continuation of getting support of the public, not just active civil society that understands a lot of things, but the support of the whole society, each citizen. People should understand why we need Euro integration on a daily basis, what it gives us. And this is a broad area of work. And I believe that maybe we cannot even calculate it in percentage, but maybe there should be some quality indicators. People should understand what European integration means. For example, concerning licensing in the sphere of transport and what it gives in other spheres of services provision. So this is the task for the government and partners and civil society and the parliament, and I believe that we should make real steps in this direction. So these are the main, and others are auxiliary. Thank you.
I would like to remind you that via Skype we have Crisis Media Center from Severodonetsk. We have Skype connection with Severodonetsk. Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank you for the information that you provided in course of this press conference. But in our question, we will ask about the local level, the progress in anti-corruption reform, in judiciary reform, in decentralization reform. It is not so much noticeable in the local level, and sometimes we see the stagnation or slowdown in reforms as sabotage. So our local question is whether you are working in the area of European standards, whether you plan anything in this area. We do not have any capacity to analyze local, regional legislation and to carry out the expertise of those legislative or regulatory acts against compliance with European standards. We do not have such institutional capacity. I think the only remedy and only solution could be to continue our decentralization efforts. And finally, I hope that due to decentralization process, we will finally establish proper mechanism of national supervision, how much local decisions comply with the national legislation. And this should be done via local administrations and the presidential administration. As of today, I'm not sure whether this cooperation is strong enough to check the compliance with local decisions with the international standards. I think that to some extent we have to establish some standards at the central level and then delegate it to the local level. And here we should think about the quality, intellectual quality, professional quality, expert quality of human resources whom we engage to the civil service. Speaking about the reform of the public administration, civil service, public governance, I think that we should act in this aspect first, and the Prime Minister is very keen to launch this reform during the current year, and probably at later stage we will be able to transfer this reform further to the local level. For some European countries, it took almost 20 years to implement these reforms. I do not expect that we should try to do this within 20 years, but when it comes to practice, many good intentions correct the primary plans because we see that something goes wrong in course of implementation. But nevertheless, thank you for your question. We asked all the local administrations where they have people who deal with the European integration to cooperate with us. By the way, we found out that in different regions, in different oblasts of Ukraine, they have different situation with European integration, and we try to keep an eye on it. Whether you have any further questions to our speakers, this is my question to our crisis media centers. I'm Roman Bosch. Maybe my question will be to Ivanna. Today, we got news that Mr. Zygmunt Gabriel became the head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Germany. He's changed Mr. Steinmeier in this position. How do you think this could influence our relations with Germany? We should clearly understand and remember that Germany has a coalition government which has developed its own policy on the one hand. On the other hand, Germany is now entering the pre-election period, and there might be some changes in the government bodies in this period. But I do not expect that the Germany's position will be very sharply changed in the nearest future in terms of the requirements to Russian Federation to stack with the Minsk agreements, to improve the security situation, etc. Keeping in mind all the limitations and restrictions from the Normandy group and Normandy forward format, I think that Germany plays an extremely important role in ensuring unity of the European partners in support of Ukraine. Dear colleagues, unfortunately, our time had expired. And we have no further time for questions, but we expect that this event would become regular in the future, and I'm very grateful to our panelists, and I wish you success in implementation of your plans. Thank you.